Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today I won a game that I should have lost. I basically blundered a move in the middle game and my opponent launched a punishing and very clever attack on my king with their queen with a mate in one threat. I had accepted that my poor move meant that I would straight up lose a piece without compensation. And then my opponent made a Botez Gambit. Please enjoy. Let's start with the review. Chess.com's algorithm. So I played okay, around 80% accuracy, slightly more accurate than my opponent, though they played fairly well. In fact, they had more best moves than me. But their blunder was probably more consequential than mine. As you can see, so reasonably sort of equal until I sort of made some inaccurate play. Opponent was completely winning at some point, and somehow completely lost their advantage with a sudden move, and I managed to capture the win afterwards. Let's now have a look at the game in context in the analysis. I played with the black pieces in this game. The opponent led with e4, e5, and they played the bishop's opening, so bishop c4. Against that, I usually develop knight f6, so also known as the Berlin defense to the bishop's opening. Opponent plays d3, so I immediately play d5. So captures, can't really capture back. Well, I suppose I could, but then I get to develop my queen. Captures, knight f3, which makes sense. I defend with knight c6. So Stockfish reckons that maybe was better with an attack on the bishop. Opponent is slightly ahead here. c3. I decide to play bishop g4. I thought so pinning that knight to the queen was probably good. They short castles. I bring my knight to b6 now with an attack. They sort of counterattack. That's fine. Happy to take. So that was apparently the best move. So that's good. They capture back, and here I whack that bishop. They're both sort of staring at that square. Need to do something about that. And that's fine. And at the end here, they've sort of doubled their pawns. I've got an open file for my queen. Yep, I thought this was potentially okay for me. I instantly lose all that advantage with bishop c5. And I have to admit, I wasn't actually sure what was the best way to fill up from this point. So I now know that actually a less aggressive push with the bishop, so playing more conservatively would have been better. And yeah, basically because this straight up just allows b4, I'm forced to move the bishop back to e7 anyway, so losing a move, basically losing tempo. Opponent develops knight d2. I sort of move queen forward. Here I wasn't sure. I thought, do I castle king side? Do I castle queen side? I'm not too sure, don't know. I did know that castling queen side would have some risks given that these pawns are already here. Opponent plays rook d1. I ended up long castling anyway, and good to see that this was apparently good, though, some structural risks here, some structural risks. Opponent plays queen e3. Now, I thought that this was potentially okay, given that's defended. But of course, this is the structural risk. So these pawns are already advanced. That pawn can push forward, and I'm in trouble. So Stockfish reckons that this move would have been best, and then forcing a trade of queens. I didn't see that. I didn't like the fact that sort of moving the knight would sort of have a discovered attack on my queen. But I thought, maybe it's okay. Maybe I'll push. Maybe I can attack. That's what I was thinking. And then as soon as the opponent played b5, I knew I was in some trouble. So obviously I need to move. I need to move the knight. And I thought about here, thought about there. I didn't like that. So I ended up playing knight a5, and that's a mistake. Because now the opponent has this very, very good move. Look at this, +6. Queen captures pawn a7. My inclination is, I could potentially trap the queen there. And that's probably what the opponent thought as well. Looks like I trapped the queen, defend the knight. However, if I did that, that would be a straight up checkmate. That's basically back rank mate. King can't go anywhere. So I thought about this for a little while and I decided, look, I have to create an escape square for my king. I just have to accept that that knight is lost. And so this was, I thought, a very clever move from my opponent. You know, I was a bit despondent. So I think they were in the 1100s and I sort of not been playing so well. So I dropped down from the 1300s to the 1200s again. So I thought, look, I have to create an escape square. So let's pop the queen here. And then something unexpected happened. So they gave check anyway. I thought, wonder why they did that, given that I thought it would have made sense for them just to straight up capture the knight. But sure, that's why I created escape square, moved the king out of the way, basically a forced move. And then they played bishop a3. And again, that was unexpected. So I thought, okay, bring another attacker. And I thought, oh, why did they do that? Is there a mating net that I didn't see before? Is there any reason why I shouldn't capture the queen? And then I decided, after thinking for some time, I don't think there is. I think maybe they straight up missed the fact that maybe they were expecting they had checkmate, and they just straight up missed the fact that the queen is under attack and it's hanging. So capture. And I wonder whether or not the opponents have slapped their forehead here. Maybe they miscounted. So they play the right move, you know, moving the knight out of the way. Now, of course, the queen is pinned to the king, but that's fine. I've already captured the queen. So capture the rook, they capture back, move the king out of the way. So if they choose to capture, that's still defended, and they did that. And basically, at the end of this, I've basically, we've traded queens, but I've also straight up a rook. So now they've got rook and knight, and I've got two rooks, and still one knight. You know, they've got more pawns, I think. So they've got 7 pawns, and I've got only 5 left. But you know, these pawns are doubled, so they don't quite count as 2. But you know, an extra rook counts for a lot. And so really at this point I thought, look, I just need to consolidate. I need to try to find some way of trading pieces. So I moved the king up, you know, threat on the knight. They defend with pawn, which I suppose made sense. You know, invitation, let's trade. They chose not to do that. And obviously there's now potentially a discovered check, so I need to do something about that. Move the king out of the way. They push a pawn, captures. I didn't want that pawn to come through, so I block with my own pawn. And they push the pawn forward, which is actually good for me because that just closes that line. So I was perfectly happy with that. At this point, I was having a think on what to do. You know, what should I do here? I thought, you know, if I do this, but, you know, the opponent would have check, and, yeah, I didn't quite like that. So I decided to, you know, basically threaten that pawn, and then potentially I could play the other rook to one of those 2 files. They push a pawn, that's fine. Here I now threaten the knight. I thought that they would probably play that. That would be the best move with check. I would capture. They would potentially sort of capture back, but that's fine because then it's rook and knight versus 1 rook. Definitely should be winning. They push a pawn instead. That's fine. Close it up. And here the opponent made a mistake. So move the pawn forward, and I thought that's fine. If I do that, they have to capture back. And here I thought, look, you know, I could just now basically force a trade. But however, you know, they still had 4 pawns here versus 2. So I thought that was a little bit risky. So instead, let's thin out some of those pawns. Now, without the pawn on the A file, these 2 pawns are doubled. So, you know, it's effectively just 2 versus 2. Very comfortable here now, very comfortable here. Yep, so they move the knight back out of the way. Here, you know, one of these is lost next turn. Yep, there we go. Now it's 2 versus 2. I'm very, very happy now. Here with check, I can capture that pawn, captures. And at this point, the opponent made one last move, and then they opted to resign. And, you know, and that makes sense because, no, these pawns are going nowhere. I've got 2 pawns versus 1. I'm up a full rook. And basically how this would potentially go is I could just force a trade of pieces. There, you know, there, captures, lose a pawn, that's fine. and basically I should be potentially winning, or potentially the more logical thing, you know, obviously the king's trying to threaten, is to push the h pawn, and then with these two pawns and the rook, I should be able to promote one. The opponent can't protect their pawn and the knight with just the king. So basically, a checkmate is pretty much guaranteed as long as I don't stuff something up. But anyway, the opponent played really well. They had that great, tactic there, but unfortunately, so blundered their queen. I think sort of in the during the height of their attack. Good game, GG. I remember doing this earlier in my chess journey. I see a strong and potentially winning checkmate line, and my opponent seemingly allows it to happen. So I launch it excitedly, and in my mind, I'm completely winning. My opponent then plays a move that perhaps I didn't anticipate, but as I've convinced myself that my plan was winning, I miss what is an obvious counterattack, something easily sidestepped, and blunder into a losing position. My hunch is that my opponent was probably so invested in the projection that they would have a checkmate with queen a8, they never considered what they should do when it didn't happen, when I created an escape square for my king. I can imagine the thought, aha, let's bring in another attacker. And in that I'm winning mindset, was blinded to the fact that the king move revealed a discovered attack on the queen by my rooks, as they're all on the back rank, or the fact that my knight was straight up hanging after their clever maneuver and ripe for the capture. In an earlier video, I spoke about the risk of mate-in-one tunnel vision, and here it struck again. Unfortunately for my opponent, it instantly transformed their winning position, +6, to a losing one, -7. I hope you found this game interesting, and thanks for watching.